At the Academy of Royal Academy of Engineering, we have a responsibility to provide progressive leadership for the engineering and technology, and diversity and inclusion plays a crucial role in this. The reality is the world is changing. There are emerging global and societal challenges, from the challenges of climate change to the challenges posed to the workplace like AI, all of which require increasingly innovative and fair solutions. Engineering is uniquely placed to respond, but to deliver the most innovative, fair, and inclusive solutions, the profession must evolve to become more diverse and inclusive. We are committed to a long-term, evidence-led program to support the profession to become more inclusive and attract and retain a more diverse workforce so that it has the breadth and depth of innovative thinking needed to address these challenges and to build a sustainable society and inclusive economy that works for everyone. Our vision is that the Royal Academy of Engineering provides a beacon of excellent research, evidence, and learning that enables a more inclusive engineering profession and high-quality knowledge mobilization and impact. So far, we have built a small but impactful research footprint in EDI. This has been focused on developing robust reports with clear and rigorous recommendations that can serve as a guide to the industry and the broader profession. Our most recent reports include, for example, the Inclusive Cultures 2023 report, a unique study to better understand how engineers perceive the current culture of the engineering profession and whether it is attracting, developing, and retaining the diverse engineers we need. The research included a survey of 1,500 engineers and revealed that while perceptions of engineering, of equality, diversity, and inclusion have improved within this profession, there are persistent macho, siloed, and hierarchical cultures that blight the work experience, particularly of underrepresented groups. The report also offers rigorous recommendations for how companies can embed more inclusive practices and transform their cultures. Another recent report that may be of interest is A Decade in Focus, which is a review of EDI literature in engineering between 2013 and 2022. It analyzes 506 documents across academic literature, publications by professional engineering institutions, corporate organizations, and trade unions, not-for-profit and engineering magazines, and policy documents. Yet, despite the steady increase in research in this area over the past decade, the findings show that there are too many gaps for too many underrepresented groups across too many key EDI areas. And this visual representation here is a building where the lights are off, pretty much showing you where areas where we're literally still in the dark and where more research is needed. This here evidence is crucial for us in allowing us to better understand where to best target our future research efforts. Recommendations from the review include further qualitative research into lived experiences of underrepresented engineers and longitudinal research to track EDI impacts, and we will be scoping those projects over the coming year. And so that brings me on to this today, which is the EDI engine, which is in line with our ambition to arm EDI advocates with the research and data they need to advocate for change. Before I tell you a little bit about the background and why we thought this research was so important, I'd like to take the opportunity to give a big thank you to Dalberg Global Consulting and their fantastic research team, Daphne Benayoun, Jake Mohan, Charlotte Hoynes, Annette Chow, Chloe Tan, as well as their support team. Your hard work and commitment was invaluable, so thanks. And to the companies who put themselves forward to take part in this research through interviews, many of you who are represented here today, thank you too. This D&I research project was initiated by the Academy to compile and explain existing data analysis demonstrating the business benefits of EDI and engineering companies. Creating a more inclusive and diverse organization is the right thing to do, regardless of the business opportunity that it presents. Of course, justice is not a commodity. However, it is motivating to understand how acting on EDI can additionally bring benefits to your business. The evidence set out in this report is wide-ranging, taking into account well-known research by organizations like McKinsey, other cross-sector research, and a wealth of STEM-specific, engineering-specific evidence. The research report includes case studies developed through interviews with a wide range of businesses alongside spotlights and quotes. The benefits are described under the 4 Ps: people, products, and partners and services. People, products and services, partners and processes, excuse me. The report includes a section on the current status of EDI and engineering and a section on actions that can be taken by engineering companies of all sizes to address EDI. We will continue to deliver new research on diversity and inclusion in engineering in order to drive positive change and create a more inclusive engineering ecosystem. And we look forward to working together with all of you on this shared goal. Please do share the findings of this report far and wide, but please do remember the full report is embargoed until tomorrow, so share the full report tomorrow. So what you can expect from today, as I said, I'm about to hand over to Dalberg to carry out our presentation, and then we'll have the panel. Please save any questions that you have right until the end of the panel discussion, so please do take notes if you need to. And without further ado, thank you all for listening, and Jake and Annette, please do come up. Thanks, Jake.
Afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for making time to come here today on this sunny afternoon. I'm Annette Chow. I'm an associate partner at Dalberg. We're a consulting firm that focuses on issues of social impact and international development. Along with my colleague Jake here, we'll be talking through some of the findings from the report we've been working on, and I'm very excited to launch tomorrow, as well as opening up to our great panel here today. Thank you all for being here. So I think Johannes has already set the scene really well. There's a lot to do in this space, and in many respects, in terms of gender, ethnicity, being able-bodied or disabled, in terms of LGBT, there's lots and lots of progress to make. In this report, we focused on two areas. Firstly, on the economic and business benefits of EDI, and bringing to life real examples where we see this across engineering companies. And I want to say thank you to those of you who have spoken with us and shared your stories on both the progress and the challenges that you've seen in the space. And secondly, on what's next. What practically can companies and others do on these important topics? We spoke with lots of companies of different sizes. We looked at a lot of the literature that we've seen so far. And writing this over the last year and this year with Jake and other colleagues, we've really appreciated the push from Johannes, Karen, and the rest of the team to ask us to be really open-minded in what we're looking at, not to force a case for EDI, but to look honestly at the evidence and think about how does it apply in different contexts to different companies. I found in developing the report that there were times where I might speak about it with someone and they might be a bit reluctant to challenge any of the findings or to say, I'm not sure why we're doing this. And I think it's because of a fear of being the person in the room who suggests that they're not supporting diversity, inclusion, or things that are right. Because we all know this is the right thing to do and that there are business and economic benefits. And what I hope is that everyone in the room here, I assume, has interest in this and has thought about this for a long time and supports this. I hope that what we can talk through today will give you a sense of the kind of evidence that's out there, the kinds of conversations that you can have to take it forward, because it is a conversation. It's something that's evolving. What we found is that a lot of the evidence out there points really strongly to the benefits commercially and in terms of business progress from EDI. It's hard to prove a causal link because this is something that has never been done before. But what we do see is that there are clear benefits in terms of employee engagement, retention, hiring, being able to access the best talent, in terms of performance and the quality of engineering work, in terms of the innovation in products and services across engineering companies of all sizes and types. So what we found, firstly, was there are many of those clear benefits, and they may not be the same for every company, but they are there in lots of cases. And the second is that progress is possible. There has been lots of progress, and there is lots that can be done, and we'll talk through some of that today. So I'll talk through some of the key findings in the report before we open up to the panel. Sorry, I might be going backwards through the slide. So just to set the scene in terms of what we mean by EDI, equality in terms of making sure that people are treated and given equal opportunity. So in terms, for instance, of equal pay for equal work. Diversity in terms of having a makeup that reflects the demographic makeup of society. And in terms of inclusion, which is the difference between being invited to the party and being allowed to dance, or being comfortable to dance, as people tend to say. Having an environment where people do feel included and like they belong. As I said, and as I think Johannes mentioned as well, this is something that I think lots of us care about because it's the right thing to do. There's a really strong moral and legal case for it. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. I think it's really important to talk about the consequences, the business and economic benefits of EDI. There's some of the evidence on this slide gives a bit of a sense of the kinds of benefits at a kind of overall level that you might see. As I mentioned earlier, it's not going to look the same in every organization. These are averages from samples that we've seen. So things like a higher likelihood of outperformance financially in terms of profit, in terms of earnings that companies are seeing, as well as what they're seeing on the market. And this makes sense because this is something where a lot of investors are looking at this space, but also that accessing the best talent possible without bias and being able to open up to new markets is something that is beneficial. Similarly, there's evidence around, specifically in engineering, that there are better results in some areas, things like profit before tax, and in terms of returns on assets. Johannes mentioned the 4 Ps, and that's how we've thought a little bit about the overall benefits from EDI in terms of people, products, partners, and processes. So in terms of people, lots of this is about accessing the best talent possible in creating an environment where people of all kinds want to work, somewhere that's inclusive and that's able to pass through into commercial benefits in terms of employee engagement, being able to hire the best talent in the first place and being able to keep them there and increase their productivity so that they can do the best they can or an environment where they can do so. Secondly, in the orange on products, in terms of diverse teams and bringing the best talent to be able to come to more innovative solutions and also more inclusive solutions that open up to more people. In terms of partners, lots and lots of partners of engineering firms care more than ever about EDI. Lots of these things have become hot topics, and this is something that can enhance the reputational and therefore the business performance of a lot of the companies that we've spoken with. And last but not least, in terms of processes, it is expensive and not good for business to manage risks badly, and there's evidence that we'll point to where EDI can help contribute to those processes. These 4 Ps reinforce each other. We've drawn them as separate shapes, separate colors, but they're very much interlinked. For instance, having the best talent and having a wide range of diverse talent can help companies innovate better. Similarly, in terms of being able to, as lots of companies are looking at more diverse procurement and more diverse supplier bases, that can translate into process and practical benefits as well. Lots of words on this page because there was lots of evidence that we looked at. But across the 4 Ps, we saw a lot of different forms of evidence, stories that point to some of these benefits. So firstly, in terms of people, what we heard a lot and saw a lot in the literature was a sense that employees care, unsurprisingly, about the environment in which they work and whether it's an inclusive one. That some 81% of engineers see diversity as a really important factor when choosing where to work, but also whether to stay there. And in a time where, for instance, in the UK, we know that women are leaving engineering roles twice as quickly as men, it's really important to see that there are cases that we saw, for instance, in this survey in Australia, where women were less likely, 1.5 times less likely to leave their jobs when they did feel that they were in an inclusive environment. This does make a difference to talent, which obviously is key to engineering companies, that engineering is a key to engineering companies, naturally. In terms of products and services, a lot of this is around inclusive design, expanding access to markets through being able to cater products and services to a wider range of people. And that doesn't necessarily mean one product or service. It can mean a wide range of products and services of different sizes and shapes that are inclusive of different groups. And we saw in lots of cases where companies could expand their reach up to 4 times by using different products. So for instance, cases like the 1999 model of Ford that was able to expand to both younger and older users, as opposed to crash dummies that are only designed for men. Things like noise-assistive technologies that can help people who are sensitive to noise, who would otherwise be using a hearing aid. There's lots of different examples and technologies and companies that we spotlighted that have been able to tap into markets that were previously unserved, but where they're able to design more inclusively for a wider range of people. And we see this on a broader level as well. For instance, that the rates of patents in the US, for instance, was at 121% higher in cases where there were more inclusive teams. There's a sense of greater innovation when there's a greater range of minds and types of thinking involved. In terms of partners, and this is an important one, it's a space where investors, corporates, and partners are paying more attention. And we saw evidence that 78% of global investors want to think about environmental, social, and governance issues. More than half of private equity firms ask their investee portfolio companies for data on EDI. And in a survey of 178 corporates, some 60% said that they were looking at supplier diversity programs, so deliberately making sure that they're supplying from companies that are diverse and show inclusive practices. And then in terms of processes, I think this is a really important one, and there's evidence that points to employees who feel that they're psychologically unsafe at work being more likely to have an accident or injury. So in this case, 80% more likely from this survey. And it's costly for that to happen. So there's evidence here around the kind of level of compensation being above $1 million in the highest case in the UK, where that was the case. I think across all of these, what we saw as well is that it's more expensive to do this stuff late than to do it early. So for instance, with inclusive design, we looked at cases where trying to address it after a product has gone to market and trying to redesign is more expensive than doing it early on. Similarly, in the case of operational excellence, it's harder to clean up after a risk has been badly managed rather than managing it in the first place. So I think time horizon and thinking about the long term is really important here as well. So in terms of what's next and looking forward, I'll hand over to Jake to talk through.
Thank you, Annette. And we'll make sure I leave enough time for questions as well. And yeah, Annette could have job sitting down rather than standing awkwardly behind me for the entire program. Brilliant. I just want to emphasize what Annette was talking about the win-win, which is this is a moral imperative, it's a legal imperative, but it's also a business imperative. Like, this is incredibly important for businesses. And we see that across the three things here around the individuals, the businesses, and the engineering ecosystem, and then the economy itself. And to maybe give an example to bring this to life, if you look at, we interviewed HS2, and you look at the Old Oak Common Station, where they introduced a new design process to incorporate how would this work from an accessibility perspective, and therefore made it, I think, I'm going to get the numbers slightly wrong, but 20% more accessible to those with disabilities. And that's not just good for the individuals, although it is, but it's also good for the participating in the economy. And we see this actually a lot more in other countries. So, for example, in women-only buses in Kenya or trains in India. Actually, the point of those is not just to benefit the individuals, but actually it allows people to participate in the economy in a way they wouldn't otherwise. And so it benefits everyone. It benefits the people doing the design, it benefits the individuals using those services, and it benefits the economy. And that's what we're trying to do here, is we're trying to say, how does EDI do that? How can it show that? And just to talk through some of the points on the slide, for the individuals, it's about fostering the culture where people can thrive and contribute to their fullest. Ultimately, engineering is a talent-based set of businesses. And so how can we ensure that talent, we both find it, and then we leverage it, and we allow it to be its fullest potential? And that talent exists everywhere. Fairness and justice, so how do we make sure that this is morally fair and just, and people feel it is fair? And then finally, the diverse backgrounds valued, respected, and empowered. So underlying that ability to thrive and to fulfill your potential is feeling valued and respected. It's feeling included. It's feeling able to and willing to dance and not just invited to the party. What does that mean for the ecosystem? So the ability to unlock that talent pool and the potential of it will benefit companies. That is true in every sector. It's more true for engineering because people are highly skilled, highly important, and the bedrock of every engineering industry sector. Important to innovation. And we'll see that, I'll come on to in a second, but the more voices you have around the table, the more innovative you will be. More diverse perspectives leads to faster rates of iteration, innovation, and new ideas. My favorite example of this is, I think it's about 15 years old, actually. But QuickFit in the UK used to market their tires exclusively to men because it was a bunch of men sitting on the marketing team and the board who designed the marketing strategy. They finally did a survey and they realized that 70% of people buying tires were women. And therefore, they completely changed their marketing strategy overnight. And they had to, because it turns out because they were the only people in the room, no one was bringing a different voice to that table, had completely the wrong idea. And so it's important to have that diverse set of voices to create innovation. And finally, the economy. So engineering is 30% of the UK's economic output. So just by any improvement in engineering has an effect on the UK's economy. But also in terms of economic activity, so participatory in the economy by being able to travel to work, being able to access services, being able to save time. There's hidden aspects to people's lives that otherwise affect them. And we're seeing a lot more focus on that. I mean, the Invisible Woman book that I don't know who's read, but it's a super interesting description of what challenges women face every day that aren't necessarily obvious and that aren't included in the design of products. And then engineering has a long way to go, and I hope that's not a surprise to anyone here, but the engineering industry is not in a great place in terms of overall levels of diversity. There are only 16.5% of engineers are women, and actually this was written before the recent report, but last month that's now 15.7%. That's almost 1% decline in the number of female engineers in the last year or 2 years. And that's of those of 30 to 45, I believe. Engineering has less than half the representation of minority ethnic groups versus the population. Less representation of disabled groups. And those who are LGBTQ, half of them are conceding their sexual orientations at work. And particularly those top two, that is there's a long way to go to make engineering thrive. And I'm sorry for the slides, some of their graphics have gone slightly wrong. But those underrepresented groups feel less included. So they don't feel as included in their workplace. There's 79% of those who feel included without a protected characteristic versus 59 to 68 who have one. And that means they are going to feel less safe, less psychologically safe, less able to contribute, and that will harm your innovation and your ability to unlock the potential of that talent. And finally, some examples of products and services, and this is the evidence for innovation. And this is increasing. There's more focus on this in the last few years than ever been before, which is super exciting and great to see. And so often those that get highlighted are the worst examples that get found out. So it's not always a great way of proving that innovation or diversity leads to innovation, but it's a great way of highlighting the risk of getting it wrong. Oximeters in hospitals that didn't detect oxygen levels, requiring kind of a redesign of the entire process. Digital services that don't work for people with disabilities. Car safety that doesn't account for women's bodies versus men, that leads to nearly 50% higher rates of sustaining injuries. These are kind of underlying challenges to our design processes that people don't realize and only get found out when someone actually brings a new perspective. And having more voices around that table, in that process, will allow you to get to that quicker and to realize the challenges and realize business benefits by making your products more suitable to the customers you're trying to target and by not having to redesign them after you've, expensive redesigns. So what can we do? What companies can do? And I think one of the things we want everyone to take away here is a lot of this is about how can you go back and advocate in your companies or outside of that, what should you do? And I'll go on to the next slide around, there's lots of things you can do, but ultimately, you don't need to do everything. There's lots of ways you can improve, and so picking a few of those, going back, is brilliant. And companies, it's not just about improving your own company, but companies have a role in driving or improving EDI across the engineering ecosystem, from education, or from primary education, secondary education, to university in particular, to the selection of jobs, and then the progression at those jobs. And we split these into three things, so society, professional, and company. Within society, actually, how can we collectively address social norms and stereotypes? So how can we make STEM subjects more attractive to females, to people from minority groups? And that's working with education institutes, supporting governments, professional institutions, and committing to EDI internally to create those role models. And actually, a lot of these are self-reinforcing. The more role models we create in companies, the more we lower lower the barriers and the stereotypes, and the more we'll hopefully create a virtuous circle rather than a vicious cycle. In the profession, how can we avoid the kind of narrowing engineering talent pools, the fact we're having fewer people going into this? And then retaining diverse talent, so avoiding the fact that there's a big drop-off of female engineers from the ages of 30 to 45. How can we avoid and combat that? And so embedding EDI in hiring, we haven't included it here, but flexibility and workplace flexibility, so how do you tailor your way you work to people's needs? And then inclusive culture, so creating a culture where people feel empowered to speak out about what they need, which will allow you to then change the way you work in appropriate ways to deal with it. And then finally, at a company, and this is probably as you go back and advocate for changes in your own companies or others, what are the things you can do to improve EDI there? And I'll come on to it in a second. But the challenges we're really trying to address there, and I'd love to hear from others during the panel discussion, what other challenges do you all face in advocating for or changing EDI? But lack of awareness, so do people understand both the problem, why it's important, and how you can resolve it? The resources, so do you have the people and money that are available to actually change these things? And some of these things don't require large amounts of budget, but some do. And then leadership, so actually this needs to be led from the top. Is the leadership there? Does it need to be persuaded? How can that happen? And we'll split this into 5 areas, which is, and my biggest ask from this is do not take away that you need to do everything on this slide to be successful. Taking away the things that actually will work with your company the most is important. So this is a kind of list of ideas, and we'd encourage everyone to look at this for inspiration rather than as a laundry list to do. But broadly those 5 areas, it's understanding where you are today, collaborating with others, so engaging experts and partners, it's not all on you, adopting a leadership-driven approach, so this has to be driven by leadership, otherwise it tends to not work. Tailor initiatives, so every initiative, whilst some are universal, at least in principle, all need to be tailored, every organization is different. And cultivating the culture, so making sure this is embedded into the culture, into all your decisions that you make, you're considering, what does this do for EDI? Will this have a negative or positive impact? Therefore, should we change it? Should we do it? Should we not? And I'm not going to read through this entire slide. I will pull out a couple of examples, and then would love in questions if people have anything they want to delve into, do let us know. But maybe thinking about some of the leadership-driven and tailoring organization. So yeah, engaging leadership, trying to get someone or all of leadership to champion EDI initiatives, to be the point person who's willing to stand behind these things, and be that voice in the organization. And that can be anyone. On the tailoring, so setting goals that are ambitious but realistic for your organization. So what are you aiming for? And trying to tailor that to what's your baseline? Where are you today? Where are you trying to get to? So give yourself some idea of okay, this is where we're trying to get to, and then how do we do that? And then you can say if you've succeeded or failed, and why. And then culture. So as I was saying, EDI should be woven into everyday practices. So when you're making decisions, particularly around people, but actually all decisions really, can you think about how this would impact EDI in your company, and therefore whether you do something differently? And actually, can you embed that as a kind of natural, a muscle memory of something you're always thinking about? And it's difficult, right? Because there's so many decisions that need to happen. But the more you can do that, the more this becomes easy, because it becomes something which is always included and natural and doesn't become a burden on anyone. And then the last one that is inclusivity, because if people are willing and feel able and confident to speak out, then they will raise some of this for you. You can bring them on board in helping you solve these problems, rather than expecting to do it for them. But you need that inclusive culture before people have the confidence to be able to contribute in a way to refine the culture. And so don't necessarily fall into the trap that because people aren't speaking out, it means everything's fine. It might mean that people don't feel empowered to do so. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. That was great. Thank you very much for that, Jake and Annette. So there you have it. That is the EDI engine, our report. And so now on to our panel discussion, so we could talk a little bit about the report's findings, but also to understand a little bit about how different people, different companies, different leaders have seen the benefits of EDI within their workplaces. So without any further ado, I'd like to invite all of my panelists up to the stage, and Rosa Morgan Baker will be overseeing this session as the chair, so thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Johannes, and thank you, Jake and Annette. I am so excited about this report. I used to work in consultancy, supporting companies to really think about how to embed EDI practices across their early talent and all the way through their businesses. And the thing that came up time and time again is, well, what's the business case? Why do we need to do this? How do I build this into my funding report? How do I build this into the ask when I put forward what we're going to be doing over the next quarter? Like, this is it. We've finally got something that is super tangible, that can be used really practically to be able to share, well, this is the business case. These are the economic benefits that will be brought to your organisation. And so I'm really excited today to be able to have this discussion with our fantastic panel and with you all. Now, we very much know, kind of looking around the room, we have friends in the room, which is great. We have the champions. We have the people who are going to be able to go out and continue to advocate for this. And so we were very intentional in putting this event together by kind of thinking, well, actually, do we want to bring all of the naysayers together? Because that's one way we could have gone. But actually, we thought, no, let's go to the people who are actively asking for this, because this is what they need to be able to convince all of those around them. And as we've got the people in this room, the networks that you all reach alone is huge. It's vast across engineering industry and the profession. And so we hope that by having this exclusive kind of preview of the report a day before it's launched, that you feel super equipped and super part of our team to be able to go out there and really share this message. And we really hope kind of through the conversation, so I'm asking you to start thinking about your questions for the panel, because I really hope kind of through the questions that you pose to the panel, we can have that start to build that discussion in terms of, well, what else is needed? How else are you going to be able to communicate this, to use this practically as you leave today? But anyway, enough from me. I'll now introduce our fantastic panel. So today I am joined by Claire Rhodes-James, who is Development Manager for Energy at McDonald, from Henrik Hyman, who is the CEO at Pure Affinity, Lorraine Martins, Global EDI Director at Arup, and Jake Morn, who you met earlier, Associate Partner at Dalberg Advisors. Between them, their accolades are huge. I'm not going to give a full intro to each of them, but I will open with an opportunity for each of you to share with your initial thoughts on the report's findings and the key takeaways that you believe that are most critical for engineering businesses, as well as giving a little introduction to yourselves. So Claire, can I pass to you first?
Thank you very much. Delight to be here. I'm a development manager in an engineering consultancy business, so I'm very much not an EDI professional, so I'd love to learn from others in the room here. I'm also excited about the report. I think as I stepped into the building here this afternoon, it's quite an impressive place. I don't know how each of you felt coming in here physically, and the history that it goes back to. And it made me think about our industry and the ego that our industry has. Is it in 1770? No, where is it? Because I think to move from feeling we ought to focus on EDI to feeling we need to is related to the ego of our industry. So we mentioned about HS2 earlier, and there's some great things happened on that project. And I was talking to a colleague in a competitor organisation. He was saying, and of course our world-class skills in this area. And I said, compared to who? And he didn't have a reference point. So to me, the business case from EDI can be seen absolutely at the heart of what makes I'm in the infrastructure industry, what makes our projects succeed on a world stage. We could have introduced one of our colleagues from Spain, where they've built however many hundreds of kilometres of high-speed rail. Did they bring them into the conversation? I don't know, because I wasn't involved in the project. But to me, the business case for EDI is so at the heart of who our industry is and how we see ourselves in the world. So I guess that's maybe a bit of a pitch from my point of view, looking at it from a business point of view. One of the things the report's it shows a lot of the benefits, but it's also quite sad to see how slow the progress is, and I think we need to take that on board. And again, in the global context, when we have teams in some other countries, we don't find it quite so hard sometimes to have a diverse team. why might that be? I think things have progressed. When I had my first job just before starting university, I was working in a factory drawing office and having lunch in the canteen in the first week as my boss sort of pushed his potato around the plate. He said, I don't know why we educate women, really, because they're just going to leave to go and have babies. So this is my introduction to the engineering world. So hopefully some things have changed, I'm sure they have. But along the way, I've had a few conversations like that, and really what's I've appreciated is that the person has actually articulated what they're thinking, even if it's not a very welcome thought. So can share a few of those types of stories over cheese afterwards. I love that the report is solution-focused. I had my own little solution moment today when being mic'd up and they said, this wasn't designed for someone who wears a dress, but it's fine. But it's just an example. And I think the practical things, as a company, Mott MacDonald is very much on its journey. We have leadership who is passionate about diversity and inclusion, but we're learning. And we see the setting of targets has made absolutely a difference. But you can still be at a board meeting where you go through targets and you're feeling a bit uncomfortable, but yet the same leadership sometimes talks across the very people who are trying to bring a different opinion because they don't offer it in the style in which we normally run a British meeting. So I think we've got plenty to learn there. And we've found collaboration with partner organisations has been really helpful. So with Leonard Cheshire, for example, the Black and Minority Ethnic Engineers Association, a whole number of organisations, that's helped us to really question our assumptions and to make some progress. I won't talk too much longer. The only one last thought I would have from a business point of view is beware the economic cycle. Because I think the way that we think about our team, our workforce, and our business challenges does change as we go through the cycle. I think we need to have EDI at the heart of that when we're seeing economic times going up and going down. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Henrik, I'm going to pass to you for the same question. So what were your initial thoughts on the report's findings? Any key takeaways that you believe are really critical?
I think it was so good to see all the data come together, and these specific examples are sort of the ammunition that we will be needing. So some of my top ones was what was it? 39% better financial outperformance if you have more diverse teams versus non-diverse teams. It was also some of the specifics. So I loved the lower likelihood of health and safety and environment incidents. 80% lower likelihood. It's not a small number. So I've been going through some of the numbers in my sort of bed reading time. We got it slightly early. And there's also a figure of the huge economic cost that this talent gap is having us and costing us, which is really a key figure at times like this. We're having economic tailwinds. We might even say with recent elections that there are sort of overall headwinds headwinds for the economic perspective, also headwinds from the movement towards the right for many of the populist sort of initiatives. So I think it's worth celebrating the progress we're making, and the report does flag, hey, we have some tools. We are now launching with the Culture Plus program, which is one of the recommendations in the report. I'm going to talk specifically about our company doing Culture Plus stuff this year. So we have been a part of the Enterprise Hub for several years, and we have been going through our own journey with a D&I audit. So we basically audit the whole company. We're a small 28 people scale up here in the UK. So we make water filtration solutions. So we would sell to large players like the tier ones of Veolia, etc. And what we did, we found it was really difficult with the D&I audit even, because there is a lot of shame. And I think ego is one barrier. The other barrier is for people that are majority traits. How can we label this feeling of, actually the thing that I'm missing is not another number. It's me being able to sit with a difficult feeling which is hard to even label. Sometimes it's shame, sometimes it's something else. And so we found it really helpful with getting outside perspectives. So we had an interview with every single team member. We got some recommendations. We got that list of recommendations, a bit like we suggest in the framework for that report. Some of our key gaps were policies, procedures. How do we make sure that there is space for different minority traits? So we're still working on some of it. We talked about the neurodivergence this year. One thing we could do is an office audit as an organization. That's perhaps one of the next things we'll be moving into. We then followed up with the honeycomb assessment. So in the honeycomb assessment, it looks at whether the team is psychologically safe, what are some of your gaps as an organization, and I can just say how valuable it is from an overall inclusion perspective. I think that was one of the big themes when we had the previous conference earlier this year. Everybody thrives when there is more inclusion. That's such an easy feeling to get people resonating with. They will perform better when they feel a sense of belonging. And so I think that was a running theme in the report itself. There are some great stats to sort of back it up. I would just sort of suggest two things if people are looking at what to do. One, set up a D&I committee if you can, but give them a budget. Don't just ask them to do it on top of their current work, on top of their current priorities. Actually give them some budget to implement it. And then two, as you go through some of those difficult feelings, whether it's shame or something else, just know that you're not alone. It's the whole field that's learning. There isn't a playbook yet. Yes, some of the numbers are getting worse, but we have the tools here. If we lean into it, there is a chance to sort of reverse that curve. And that's perhaps what this report is about, in my view.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you. Lorraine, kind of thinking about it from an EDI perspective, as an EDI practitioner, as someone that is constantly kind of championing this day to day, how is this report kind of supporting you in kind of your next steps?
Thank you, Rosa. And I love Henrik. I don't see Henrik very often. Have I pronounced your name correctly?
Yes.
Hello, Claire. I'm not being the sort of favourite here. but why? I'm going to answer the question. But why I love Henrik is because Henrik's a startup. You started up a small business, right? As I recollect it, and at its foundation was EDI. And so for me, it was an example of actually it can be done. And you speak about it with such passion and candour that I think there are lessons to be learned alongside the report, but just from spending time with Henrik. Anyway, question as a practitioner. So I joined Arup in September last year, and my mission impossible was to create our first ever global EDI strategy. So we've got 5 regions. Each region had its own kind of stuff that it was doing. Good stuff, I'm not knocking it. It's a very good, some very good work. But we didn't have a kind of narrative or a story about why collectively we're doing it. But actually, it's riven within our values and our purpose, because we want to create a better world, a safer world, a sustainable world for everyone. So actually, we've been talking about it, but not really nailing our colours to the mast. So the Mission Impossible was accepted by me, don't know why. But to your questions, we came up with 4 kind of areas that we would be focusing on. One is our people, and your 4 Ps, right? This is all separate. One is our people. So the extent to which there are any barriers, impediments to getting into the business, the extent to which we represent the geographies that we work in, the extent to which we are enabling people to thrive, how we support our people is really crucial. The next one was around our culture. Now, you've kind of riven the culture in the processes and people stuff. So we're saying, actually, that our leadership, in particular, really needs to exemplify inclusive behaviours in order to create the environment in which our people can thrive. The third element is our clients, so our partners, or how we deliver our products, which is about how we both learn from our clients, but also push our clients to do more in this space. and that we provide teams that are diverse, to your question about drawing in the different skills and expertise that we have across our entirety, so that we're presenting our clients with that kind of expertise, and we have it at our disposal. And then the final one is the community, so the output, the bit that impacts and lands on the work that we do, so that we create built environments that are accessible, that people want to be in, that people own, that they can move around freely, all of those things. And I guess I'm sharing that because the corollaries are writ large in the report. So I was very excited to read it. And I also had somebody in my organisation came up to me, I hadn't started very long, and they said, Lorraine, and I'm used to this because I present as a very accessible person. Lorraine, I'm really committed to EDI, but I haven't really seen the business case. And I said, well, Deloitte, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, yeah, but really, is there really, yeah. In the nice way. And so now I am really equipped with the thing that I know will land really well with my engineering colleagues, because it's very simple, and I don't mean that in a reductionist way. It's really straightforward in terms of the messages. It's very clear. The evidence is insurmountable. And so now we can have a different conversation in our business, which isn't actually about the business case, which is about how do we really make change? How do we make these things stick? How do we move things a little bit quicker than we have before? So I'm already an advocate for the report. I'm sorry I have to wait till tomorrow before I can share it, but I just commend you, Jake and team, for doing a fantastic piece of work in making a topic which I think we skirt around. You've brought all of the evidence together in a way that I think is incredibly accessible to engineers, right, as opposed to us as practitioners. And then we can move the conversation to, I think, hopefully another space. So thank you. Okay, thank you.
And Jake, I feel it's mean to kind of say kind of what's the most critical piece to you kind of within this report. So kind of looking at it from another angle and kind of reflecting on what you were saying earlier around like kind of the challenges. As people use this report and take it out into the wider world, there will be naysayers. There will be challenges that they come up against. And so one of the things that I found kind of reading the report is that it presents an incredible view in terms of like, these are the benefits, but also what could go wrong? So is there anything kind of that, like, what can go wrong in terms of kind of as you're championing this? What are pitfalls or common challenges that people may come across as they kind of seek to use this in the wider world?
Yeah, great question. And yeah, because I kind of building on what you were saying actually about it's difficult because there is no causal proof of EDI impacting business performance. There's basically no proof of anything impacting business performance because it's such a multifaceted thing that it's essentially impossible to prove things. So you'll always have a naysayer who can say, well, that evidence that's not quite right. They haven't considered that. You haven't done a multivariate regression which incorporates 100 different factors and requires every data from every company in the world. So you can never fully, if someone is always challenging the evidence, you will never be able to prove it. But there is insurmountable, there's a vast amount of evidence which indicates the importance of EDI to businesses. And for me, the kind of important thing and the most surprising thing, as someone asked me earlier, is it's actually quite simple, the conceptual argument, which is that if you were reliant on talent and people, then getting the best talent into your organization and maximizing the productivity of that talent across everything you do, from both the processes, the productivity, the innovation, the products, how you design things, that has a tangible benefit on your business. And I think that's unarguable, actually. How you do that is hard, and as we said, the gap is big and it's worse than in other countries. But I think the need to do that is insurmountable. And actually, what surprised me a little bit was also that EDI and a focus on EDI is not only about accessing new pools of talent, but increasingly it's important to everyone. everyone cares about EDI, and people are making decisions on the businesses that they work in because of the EDI policies of that business. And so this is important for everyone. And actually that, I think, is something that wasn't necessarily true 5, 10 years ago, but is true now. So maximizing that, that's what I would say. If you take one thing away from this about how to advocate for this in your organization, that's the messaging that I would use.
Just from my experience, I think one of the difficult things is time. So when I've worked in teams where people are very different to each other, it's taken me a long time to build even an ability to have a good conversation with some of those other people. And so as leadership, you need to create the sense that this team is here to stay, and therefore you then invest in those relationships. I think, back to my comment about the economic cycle, when there's chillier winds coming from outside, people sometimes panic and go for what's easier. So it's easier for me to form a relationship with someone who's a bit like me. And it's easier for the person next door. And you see that teams, if they want to become a little bit more efficient, quickly, maybe they do that. But I guess my call to arms about how do we see our industry was actually more about that's not our challenge, and therefore we need to be prepared to take time. And that's in under economic pressures, that's something which is sometimes difficult.
Yeah, absolutely, completely. And I think kind of it's something that we come up against kind of across organisations of all different sizes. And I think kind of, Henrik, as you kind of mentioned earlier, as a small or as a medium or growing organisation, I guess kind of some of the challenges that we often hear is that it's about we need to be retaining our staff and getting more people into our business so we can scale, or we need to be really thinking about kind of our product and making sure that we've got something that is going to really kind of hit right with investors, or we need to be getting that money in, and the link between those key things and EDI isn't always made directly. And that's why kind of we've created the Culture Plus platform, which Henrik was speaking about earlier, which is our online platform for startups and scale-ups to kind of support them in embedding D&I good practice within their organisations. But for you, Henrik, have there been any particular challenges that you come up against, any challenges kind of within your business or around your business that have kind of said, why are we putting so much effort into this?
Yes, there's definitely. Oh my gosh. Some of the big examples are people would try to optimize for efficiency, and you would almost see the tendency happening in front of your eyes. I would see it. I would see 3 hires being made in a row with very similar traits out of the 10 protected traits from the 2010 Equality Act, and I would be like, hold on a second, what's happening? And being very frank, that was really what drove me to say, let's do the D&I audit. Even though we're trying to do work, let's do a D&I audit now that the leadership team has changed. Are they bought into it properly? And we then did the audit, we got some training, and I think everybody was much more bought into it and trained afterwards, and now there's a lot better spread across the hires. I would say the targets is one thing that comes up with some controversy, and we found ways to navigate those controversies as a small team, where one would be, we want the targets for the top of the funnel before we hire a new individual. And having it at the top of the funnel, what we see is it actually filters through. And if it doesn't filter through, it's because of your point. It's because of conscious bias or unconscious bias, in which case we then say, what's happening here? The startup issue is we don't have time or money. So people say, what are you going to do? Why are you doing this stuff? And I would tell them, we can either get somewhere bad fast, or we can get somewhere good slightly slower. And that's really what it comes down to. You can drive the company off a cliff really fast by being very efficient, but you may not get to the best place. And that's what the report emphasizes as well. It really came up to me when they were saying, it's more expensive to do this late than before you launch. And so how can we embed this in the conceptual design? There's another rule that we would use to overcome this issue, which is the 80-20 rule. So 20% of the effort gets you 80% of the output. So we won't be the perfect example of EDI because all of my staff and all of the team would be doing 60% of the time on it. But we can do the 20% of things that are recommended in reports like this that really drives a big improvement. And that's perhaps what this helps to give us the tools for.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm very aware that I need to open up the conversation. I could chat with you guys all day. So, do we have any questions from our audience at all? Oh, a couple over. Oh, many a hand. We'll start over here, please. Thank you.
Sam Waller from the University of Cambridge. There's been a lot of discussion about the why and the fact that this report does an excellent job of convincing people that this needs to be done and that kind of thing. So I think we're all kind of sold on that, or we think we've got the way to sell that reasonably well. So I just wanted to focus a bit more on the how, as in what do we actually need to do at a tangible level. I look very much at vision and visionability in the population and how you consider the visual demand that a particular interface places on the user. So I'm thinking about things like employee systems, like websites to monitor your sick leave, or like the lighting or the air conditioning controls in the office, or the outputs of your business in terms of the size and the contrast of the stuff that's on the packaging or the instructions or that kind of thing. And I wanted to sort of throw the question out there as to how would you guys actually even just take the example in that subtitles thing on that TV. Is that text big enough? How would you answer that question? Is that text big enough? If I take the audio in this room, how do you tell if those speakers are good enough?
Brilliant, thank you. Great question. I think thinking about from the experiences that you've had, where are those key elements of the how? Are there particular things that you would point to as a starting point, perhaps, to help people to think about, okay, if I'm going to explore, I'm on board with the why, but now I'm thinking about the how. Where should I be starting? What sort of things should I be looking out for? Anything that really springs to mind for any of you?
So I think the way that the report is crafted in having the 4 Ps gives you the kind of key as to the how. So I'm tempted to, I'm thinking of the report and I'm thinking of your question, which are kind of connected. So how do you know that your venue is accessible? You have a framework that says, actually, we need lighting, size, pitch, font, and make sure that you've done all of your tick boxes before the event. You know that there's a lift, or you don't know that there's a lift. You know about you kind of hire venues on the basis that this meets your criteria. And I think the how for engineers is how we translate that. I think inclusive design is like the how, the manifestation of the actual edifice that they're building. Does that make sense? So that they've got a checklist of stuff that they need to do that creates an environment that is physically accessible. So by making sure you follow these guidelines, you will create an environment, a physical environment that is inclusive. Bless you. And if there are any other adaptations that you need to make, then you can factor those in. Because whilst you might have a hearing loop, other people might have different needs, you make sure you cater for them and you ask for those questions in advance. And what I think the report says is that you do this as a kind of iterative process. You are regularly checking the things that you need to do to deliver an inclusive environment or to attract new people to your organization by the visuals that you present, and not having stock images, but images of, this is what we look like, and the language that you use is accessible. So all of those things, in a sense, I don't want to be mechanistic because the report isn't mechanistic, but it points us in the direction of this is how you can do these things in bite-sized ways, and it's not linear. You can pick whichever you want to do and then follow through. And I think that's what I've really appreciated by the report, by honing those things together, giving us examples of case studies of where it's been successful, and then we can pick and choose and fit according to our own organisation. So that's a kind of long-winded kind of response, but the how's within the report. And I think what we have done historically is be overwhelmed by the volume of things that we need to do. And I think the counsel of this report is that actually pick what you want, right? From the 4 Ps, pick what you want, and go with it and then move on to something else. And I think that for me is really good counsel, because it doesn't feel like you're overwhelmed by the volume of things that we have to do. And you can put your own pressure on yourself for the levels of progress and success that you want to make, she said.
Anyone else? I was just going to add a small practical thing. Just in terms of thinking about some of the things you've put there, I mean, with organisation, we try to be a learning organisation. So at the end of any big meeting, we'll go around and we say, what went well? So you get some positives out. And you have to be specific. You know, everybody engaged, the sandwiches were fantastic. It could be that a particular topic was given the right respect. What could have gone better? And then you have to be very specific and say, well, actually, the font could have been bigger. We followed the rules, or the room was too hot. And then how do we feel? So you then do a check-in. And it sounds very trite, but actually we find if you use that method repeatedly, it creates more safety for people to actually say what went well and what actually say what could have been better. Because you'll start off, people will go, oh, well, actually, they always start by something about, oh, the room was a bit hot. But actually, once you've had a few meetings, maybe they'll mention something a bit different. So it's a kind of cultural piece there, I would say.
Jake, go
Yeah,
ahead.
maybe to start summarising what others have said, but maybe classic consultant style, I'll reframe the question, because I don't think there's any such thing as an inclusive event. How can you define something to be inclusive? You can have an event which is more inclusive than another, but you can't have a static definition of what inclusivity means. The purpose is to ask yourself the question of who will be coming to that event, who will be looking at that screen, and therefore, how do I influence the design of that product? And that's not to say that every product needs to be accessible to every person in the world, right? That's not how products work. But it means you need to be thinking about the audience that it's going to go towards, and then bringing them in the testing. So saying, therefore, should we bring people who are hard of sight into a testing of subtitles and use that to differentiate the size of the text that we use? Should we be choosing locations based on accessibility requirements depending on the audience that are going to come? And so you're asking yourself the question, and then you're being kind of iterative about it, you're improving it over time and making it better and better. So I would not, and that also relieves some of the burden, which is why I think this is quite important. This isn't about being perfect. This is about being better and getting better over time. And if we constantly try and get better at this, then all the problems that we've seen will start improving.
And I think kind of like, as I mentioned at the start, we know that this room in particular, we have the champions in the room. We're not trying to convince you that this is the right way to go. It's equipping you to be able to have we're not the, this group isn't the majority. And so when you go out of this room, when you're encountering people from different areas who are saying, but where is the business case for me to even start considering what the how is? There's lots of different places that signpost the how. The report has a lot of kind of references which help you to then kind of take your next steps. But sometimes the first hurdle that needs to be overcome is why? And this gives a really clear, tangible why. I think kind of as well in terms of like what we're doing as the Academy, so we have our One Action Plan, which is something that is a framework that's being used across the Academy to really think about how we can be embedding D&I good practice across all of our externally facing programs and projects. And so we've got a small team that are now working with every externally facing team and department across the Academy to help them to think about, okay, well, in our awards, in our research, in the grants that we give, how are we ensuring that we are embedding D&I good practice? And so sometimes it's also kind of thinking, well, actually, how do we get this to be that business as usual? How do we get this to be a key consideration within every product and project, so that as we continue to grow as an organisation, we've got D&I as that golden thread that runs throughout. Can we take a question from the audience? Yeah, absolutely. We'll go to here. Okay, thanks.
Thanks. The issue of talent and that talent pipeline has come up quite a lot, and I'm wondering how this report interfaces with other things that are going on in terms of how we broaden education and make young people recognise that engineering is something that could be for them, and how we link that to a business case, because I think it might have been Henry who said Henry, sorry, who said something about, it costs a lot of money to get good talent. How much does it cost, and how can we convince people that there is a business case for investing in young people to come into engineering?
I'm happy to start off, and I think there is an element here which is about the profession as a whole. So we have the individual, the company, and the profession. One of the major issues we have is the minority traits basically moving out of the profession over time. There's a lot of ageism, which was also flagged as one of the gaps. And the cost really comes up in all of the knowledge and know-how and engineering powers that these individuals contain. It basically leaves these companies every time they leave. So I think there are two costs to it. One is the cost of getting talent in through the door. If all the talent, like we flagged in the report, is interested in EDI, if we're not having any answers ready when new talent come in through the door and they're asking, oh, do I want to work here? Do I see myself working in Arab or in this organization? If we don't even have an answer, they will just be turned off and we can't access that talent. And that's very hard to put a price tag on. My wife would often challenge me on these things have sort of always been tied into an economic cost. But a lot of it is hard to put a cost onto. It's just a sort of qualitative. And so there's a cost of not accessing talent, and then there's a cost of losing talent. How much is that losing us? Well, the report has one figure. It's £2.5 billion per year just for not having enough talent. Individually, it's a lot more expensive to hire talent. So as a startup or a company in the sector, it will cost us more to hire them. It will take more effort. It will take longer. Just kind of back to the point of we don't have time. Okay, you're now wasting time trying to hire people because you didn't prioritize EDI. So it's a bit like a leaky ship. You're trying to fix holes when the whole thing is sinking because you haven't taken it into the conceptual design.
Mindful of time, so I'm going to take two questions at once. So we'll have the question here and a question there.
First of all, thank you very much for each of the panelists. You really covered this canvas about this debate, offer different insight, wisdom, and cover different area. I believe it's great to cover two questions. So I would like maybe invite all the panel to think, and I would like to hear your view. Just take a step back, rather thinking about just the talent for your organization, how you serve the client. I want every human being on this planet is unique. So in order to provide society is consist of all the individuals. If we want to really build up the society a better place, better side, we should include everybody, regardless talent, not talent. We need to upskill every one of them right from birth on this. Even before the birth, educated the society, so on. I just wonder what you as engineer, organization, engineers, to help that. The second question is, I think this evidence from this report, although I haven't read it from what you said here, evidence. Now, Claire mentioned it like she was frustrated, not fast enough. I would totally agree. How long we have to build up the evidence, like COVID, okay? If we need to believe some expert that produced this one, if this is a good thing for our society, we should listen to this expert, go for it. So I think how can we, and basically, rather than keep on building evidence, it's better just like spread the word and take actions, accelerate, and make sure we have the pace and drive the change. I would like to hear views on the second question as well.
And then we'll go back into the audience. So would anyone like to comment?
So the second question, it's as a practitioner, I don't need the evidence. But actually, for our business, there are people in there that do need the evidence. So this is why we're welcoming the report, because actually it attends to those who need convincing because they see EDI as tangential or parallel to what they're doing. I think what we're trying to say through this report is that it's part of the business. So that's the kind of business case. So it's not, I think there's that work that needs to be done. whilst we're trying to do the changes. And how I've interpreted your second question is around choices that businesses make. And so we've chosen to make EDI a priority for us as a business because it's commensurate with the values that we talk about. We want to make changes in the world. We want everyone actually to benefit from what we do. So if we're not amplifying our aspirations and our vision for EDI, we're kind of stymieing ourselves from attracting that broad breadth of people that would want to be able to contribute to what we want them to contribute to. So hopefully in this succinct way, I'm answering both of your questions, I think.
Add.
Short version. So for the first question, I think we need to go early when it comes to education. I think we have a unique chance right now to leverage the new tools that are coming out as engineers. So the new tools, we have things like AI that are getting a lot more accessible, which means we can customize things. It can be used as a tool to benefit the sort of individualization that could come. And this ties into the second question, really. How do we sort of show action? I think we can do that as a group. We can do that as universities. So create these jealousy cases where universities that prioritize EDI within the engineering sector, they go at much faster improvement rates in terms of not getting sort of dislocated by AI or other macro trends. Also companies, if you can have companies show faster growth and better growth, more equitable growth. So it's not just about the money tag, it's also about the equitable growth. Then I think you basically get jealousy cases where people are taking action. And those jealousy cases, to me, are what's going to drive the change for the naysayers who are outside of this room. They'll be like, oh, what are they doing at Claire's team? Why are they winning the bids instead of my team? I want to win the bid. That's how you get people's attention. And we need to be taking attention to take action now to create that jealousy case.
I'm going to just make one comment on the evidence piece before we go out to our final question from the audience. I think kind of, as we saw earlier in Johannes' presentation, we saw that there was so many places where the lights are still off, so many areas where there isn't enough evidence yet. And even in the areas where the lights are on, so where we've got lots of evidence in kind of the the benefits of bringing more women into engineering industry, for example, there's still that slight hesitance in terms of like, well, but what's the business case? And so that's why we've really lent into this, because it's like there's so much evidence out there that it's beneficial, that there are gaps in the data that we can see even from last month, where the research is coming to show that kind of those women in kind of mid-career are leaving industry. But there also needs to be something that backs that up in terms of, from the economic side, this is what also needs to happen. We know that there's a moral imperative, we know that there's a legal imperative, but we need to also have that business case to ensure that it can really be pushed forward through business, because currently it isn't being pushed forward at the rate and the pace that we need it to. Okay, we're going to go to the audience for one final question before we wrap up. Just over here, perfect.
Hello, thank you very much for your time. My name's Michelle Mace. I work as ID manager at Babcock International. I'm just interested to put the question out there to yourselves and maybe people in the audience. Working in a company like that, it's often questioned, what's the quick win? And a lot of the information that's been presented today is really looking at that cultural change, which is so important, but that takes so much more time. And we've talked about effort. How do we work on that culture of quick wins? Because they all add up eventually. We know that they're doing something, but how do we change and convince people to put that time in for the long haul to see that culture change?
Brilliant. I'm going to tie that into my final question as well. So kind of thinking about kind of that practical piece of advice that you would give to help people take it from being like, well, actually, how do we make that, how is this kind of like a quick tick box, a quick win, to how do we make this a business mindset within an organisation? Jake, I'm going to come to you first.
Yeah. It's a difficult question, and I would encourage everyone to look in the report and a bit of a kind of apply that to your own company and apply what you think yourself. But if I was thinking about this from a general business perspective, the questions I would ask myself first are, who in leadership is advocating for this? Is there anyone? If not, who could do this? What is the lowest, easiest path for them to do this, right? There's lots of ways of encouraging. Is it communication? Is it a regular weekly update email? Is it a presentation that they're doing? So how do you kind of quickly give them easy ammunition to be able to do this in as easy way as possible, because senior people are busy? And then I would probably, so that's kind of the kind of cultural aspects, and there's lots more you could do once that exists, but that's probably the first thing I would ask. And the other parts I'd actually much prefer to hear from others, but I would like to think about, okay, once you actually have your EDI team in place, or your kind of people who are looking at it, there's lots of changes you can then make across the journey of people at the organization. So recruitment changes, the quick wins there around implementing diversity in your recruitment, job postings, etc., through to actual flexibility of people in careers and jobs, and then progression and how you think about that. So yeah, I think it will be highly tailored to your organization, but that's probably the way I would think about it. So culture first, leadership, who's driving it, and then once you have that, okay, where can we make the biggest changes quickest? And then starting it. And don't let perfect be the enemy of good, right? If there are changes you can make which you think will work, then do them. There's no need to try and get everything done at once. This should be incremental.
Thank you, Jake. So I try to push back on the quick win and silver bullet stuff. I just think, we're talking about transformation in most cases, and generally, if you're introducing a new program of work, it's not about the quick wins, it's about the long term. I think building your narrative and your story and doing that in an engaging way with the entirety of your business is a really important win, because there you get engagement and ownership of the direction of travel, of the aspirations that you want for your business. And I think that serves you well then for the other activities and initiatives that you want to do. So in terms of sequencing, I think it's that engagement piece with your business about why it's really important to you. And then you can, from that, things can flow. But I'd push back on this quick win and silver bullet, because we don't apply that to other disciplines, right? Health and safety, what's the quick win with health and safety? What's the quick win with finance? I mean, let's have a bit more of a kind of mature discussion, I think, about how we transform our businesses.
Yeah, well, I could listen to Lorraine all day. So I think we are engineers. We are the people who take action. We have a guess, take action, we collect some data. And it applies to this space. So I would say, make a list of the problems. We did that. There is a honeycomb that you can do with Culture Plus. Maybe you already know the problems, maybe you don't. This engine, the Culture Plus, will give you a report of where your gaps are. And then you can say, okay, there are 2 to 3 areas. Maybe it's people, maybe it's processes. I would basically take those, and then I would say, okay, we're going to take initiative. We're going to take action. We're going to try these 2 tools that the team have highlighted, and then go back and have that conversation with the leadership team again to say, oh, there's a little bit of momentum for this field. We got some feedback, and actually we are slightly better now for neurodivergent members of the team. And there are lots of neurodivergent members of the engineering sector. That's just one thing that's sort of a big learning. And then you have momentum. So fit within the larger perspective, try to do these small initiatives so that you build momentum and the leadership starts to get buy-in to it.
Hard to follow that. I love the piece about thinking about who are we and who do we want to be. If I had to think about some very simple, practical things that for us has made a difference, setting targets can be done quickly, but does it actually take you somewhere? The practical thing that I saw made changes was diverse interview panels and diverse promotion panels, because you bring a different kind of listening, you hear different things, And it also opens up the conversation about what the assumptions are in the heads of all the people who are on those panels, which then start slowly to change some of the culture. And people become aware more of their own assumptions. So there's a small thing.
I think one of the quicker wins that we've been looking at is really thinking about how do you make it part of your everyday mindset. And so if you're making EDI kind of that one of those questions in terms of, okay, great, we are embarking on a new project looking at water filtration, right? Where are we building in EDI within this? We are looking at a new project which is going to be bringing in new clients for X, Y, or Z. Great. How are we showcasing what we're doing in EDI? How are we bringing in kind of our thoughts here? And so it's in kind of taking people from that quick win mindset to this is an organizational change. One of the easiest things is kind of getting people to start thinking about it again and again as kind of one of those things that they check. They check themselves on as they're doing any part of their role, and thus kind of helping to weave it in across an organization. And that then leads to that wider organizational change as well. I could speak all day and could kind of speak with you all day, but alas, our time has come to an end. So I would really love to say a huge thank you to our panel. Thank you so much for your incredible insights today and for helping us to be able to launch this. Also, thank you to you all for coming and bringing your brilliant questions. I really hope that this is the beginning of the discussion, not the end of the discussion, and we can continue over refreshments and then also kind of outside of this. Please do, as Johannes mentioned, share on social media. The report, it goes live tomorrow. Take your mini brochure with you and kind of put it on the desk of someone who you feel really needs to see this. And do be reading the full report. Hopefully there's something in here for everyone to help move this conversation a little bit further forward, or even a big bit further forward would be really great too. Thank you all. A huge thank you to Jake, Annette and the Dalberg team for everything that you've done on the research, and especially to Johannes, Karen and the Academy team for, and where's Susanna gone? And Susanna. And the Academy team and Reese as well. So many people come together to make these reports. They don't just happen overnight. And so, huge thank you to everyone that's been involved. And I leave you with this.